So how do you choose which house or which faction to build up first in your collection and to which to paint up, etc.? There's so many houses and factions to pick from, and well, I'll go over the 5 great houses and then you can pick based on your personality or your favorite color or whatever you want to use. First up, House Merrick. They tend to have purple mechs, except that they also have many other different colors, but that's their main house color. Think of this as sort of like an Austro-Hungarian nobility, like a European pre-World War II style or pre-World War I style, where you've got a lot of free worlds that are partially independent of each other and kind of loosely collected together, but have almost like a king or like a royalty that runs the show at the top. Now, Merrick is the richest of the 5 houses, of the 5 great houses. They have a lot of money, which they have gained through trade with the other houses. Think of them almost like Ferengi, that they'll even trade with you while they're fighting a war with you. But they have all the money and they tend to spend a lot on mercenaries. But by themselves, they are no slouch either at fighting. So maybe you can think of them as like the Lannisters or something in Game of Thrones if you watch that series. So maybe the Merrick is kind of like House Lannister in their way. I'm going in slow motion here to show you 2 of the pieces of art in this vintage book. And the reason for that, and one of these is Anton and Janos Merrick, the 2 brothers who were in charge of House Merrick in the era of the the 3025-ish style era. And the reason is because this is now kind of my street cred here, in a way. I paid for these, so it's not really street cred so much as bought street cred. But I am now the defender and the safekeeper of the original art. These are not prints. These are the actual original art. So how many people do you know who are the safekeepers of one of the lords of the original 5 houses from vintage Battletech? In any case, Merrick, again, spends a lot on mercenaries. We'll also tend to screw mercenaries over sometimes and kind of just drop them off and leave them somewhere to leave them to fend for themselves if they kind of sour on some mercenary group. And thus sometimes mercenaries become kind of hateful and vengeful towards Merrick. Also, they will tend to use trebuchets, centurions, battle masters, spiders, lambs, but they will have some trouble sourcing PPCs because their industry doesn't really make them. So they will sometimes have variants that replace PPCs with large lasers, like a Battle Master with a large laser, for example. Now, if you like the color yellow, then it's House Davian or Davian, depending on who you talk to. Now, I say Davian, but some people say Davian or Davian or something else. But I'll say Davian. Their specialty is supreme military tactics, and they will favor sort of like the medium mechs because they favor skill and tactics over things like brute force or numbers, unlike some of the other houses. And they even have like a special school for military schooling. That's like the pride of the inner sphere. Now, the Davian House Guard is actually mostly blue with some white and red stripes like the French flag from the current day 21st century. But they are still yellow in the vintage books. If red is your favorite color, then you might consider House Kurita. Kurita is loosely based off of Japanese culture with a little other cultures mixed, some other cultures mixed in too. Kurita, if you know history, was one of the admirals of the Midway battle group that was defeated in World War II. So it's sort of a famous Japanese name. The region, or the country, if you want to call it that, is called the Draconis Combine. They favor small, fast mechs like the Jenner and the, well, not fast because the Jenner and the Panther, so very high power, firepower, armor, light mechs in large numbers, almost like waves of kamikazes. And rather than using brute force, they try to use skill and moving swiftly like the wind, if you want to think of it that way. And sort of like the heavier mechs that Kurita would use would be something like the Dragon. So it's really kind of the smaller, large numbers of small, semi-sacrificial mechs and a few larger sort of capital mechs like a Dragon, which someone like House Steiner wouldn't even consider a mech. Life in the DC is known as nasty, brutish, and short, but honor is very important. So honor is like more important than anything else, and it shows throughout all aspects of Draconis Combine life. If blue is your favorite color, by the way, I like Steiner and I like blue, then House Steiner might be your choice. Now, House Steiner is famous for having a very high level of industry. They're the most industrialized of the 5 houses, whereas like the DC is kind of poor, and Merrick is very rich, Steiner is very industrial. And their military tactics kind of goes along with their heavily industrialized advantage. So they will tend to use very large assault mechs and brute force. I kind of like that playstyle because it kind of simplifies things. And they highly prefer atlases, and mechs smaller than an atlas are more like training mechs. And they almost don't even use mechs that are 60 tons or less. And you can probably guess that their leadership comes from like a Northern European style background. And then finally, if you like green and greenish tones, then House Liao might be your bet. Now, House Liao is seen by many as being the weakest of the 5 great houses, and they do have the least territory and the weakest industrial base, but they can make up for that because they tend to use a lot of subterfuge and secret missions and spy action to cancel out their raw military disadvantage. In fact, they started a civil war inside Merrick between Anton and Janos Merrick, and they also attempted to replace the leader of Davian with a clone that would follow the commands of House Liao. So they've got, that's the kind of thing they do. The signature mech for House Liao would be a strange contraption called the cataphract. Because Liao has weak industry, they can't really just make whatever mech they want to. So if you look carefully, the cataphract is a collection of mech parts from other mechs, like its legs and one of its arms are marauder parts, and other parts of it come from other mechs. Culturally, you can think of them as a combination of present-day China and Russia. That is the Chinese state plus like the Russian secret services combined have turned into House Liao in the future. Now there's another major faction, which is Star League or Comstar, which I will only touch on briefly here. This book actually is from the attempt to rebuild the second Star League, so it's really kind of beyond the year that I like, which is 3025. But this is, anyway, a vintage book here describing the attempted reconstruction of the Star League. Basically, the Star League fell apart, and each of the 5 houses claimed that it was the rightful descendant of the Star League. Of course, other groups thought the same thing, and including the clans and various other mercenary groups and whatnot that all considered themselves the continuation of the Star League, and Comstar itself considers itself the Star League as well. So the thing about a whole bunch of people thinking that they are the Star League is that it's kind of like from The Incredibles, if you watch that. When everyone is Star League, nobody is. Another set of factions to pay attention to, but are also kind of minor factions, are various factions in the periphery. Basically, not quite big enough or powerful enough to qualify, and they're kind of decentralized, and they've got their own little groups out in the periphery. The strongest of these periphery states are actually almost as strong as House Liao, though.